Hello, I'm George Gonzalez, and I'm obsessed with making games. And today we're going to talk about how to level up. We're at level one. You figure out your engine, what you're going to do. Now it's time to go to level two. And this is where you go from barely knowing anything to become hireable, what it takes to get hireable in the field. And the goal is to learn 100 new things. And so what I did is we talked about this Marvel Rivals game last time. And so we have this in Unity 6. I installed the LTS version, Unity 6 0.50, okay, F1. That's a LTS, okay? Installs LTS. That's it, okay? So I fixed that. Now, Unity has these tutorials. I'm gonna scoot over this way. And you can start here and it'll show you some things. And this is good for learning how things work in Unity. Enter play mode, it'll help you debug. It gives you an idea of what to do with the scene. And so it's guiding you through doing this, right? Oh, how the editor works. And you might say this is really dumb, but no, if you are starting from scratch, remember, you know almost nothing about the engine other than how to hit build, because that's what we learned. What I did is I went to ChatGPT and I asked them, if I want to learn how to make a game like Marvel Rivals, what would it take? Just as a, hey, let's say I have no source. What ChatGPT did is it went through all the mechanics, and I asked them to do 100 because I wanted to learn 100 skill, system, concept that I need to learn. And we have in here core game development, character mechanics, hero sure specific, combat and abilities, AI and enemies, offline or PvE, multiplayer networking, and then maps and level design, team, role systems, UI, UX, art, animations and sounds, game systems, infrastructure. So all these things, polish, optimization, development. And this at the end is that's why it's key to learn this at the beginning, because you don't want to learn all this, spend 5 years learning all this, and then getting to this part only to realize like that there's things that you need to change, okay, or that you needed a license that you didn't have or something, okay. So that's why we did this first, so that you can continually test these in the platform of your choice, okay. So that's what we did. So that's what I did. I have a list of 100 things. If you do all, and we're gonna put it to the test. I'm gonna go over a few. This you can learn about Unity in here if by following this tutorial in Unity. So this helps you understand how it works. Move using WASD, look around your mouse, click to shoot, jump with spacebar, tab for options, okay, escape to stop play mode or hit stop, okay, and it knows that you completed this, okay. Now it tells you to go deeper. Everything select the game object. It gives you a hierarchy. So this is the beginning. In here, you learn the Unity editor basics, okay. So let's start with that. Scene management. How do you set up a new scene? Unity game objects and components. That's what this is going through, all this, the components, how it works. Change the gravity force to 12. So you have here in here a gravity force. So you have to find it and figure out where the gravity force is. And I wonder if it's at the bottom. It says gravity downforce for controls. When you select game object, you'll see its component inspector. Components contain property, the player character controller. So player character controller, gravity downforce, and you change it to 12. Okay, so this is something that you can look into to learn. Okay, and so it keeps going through these. How to save. When you hit play mode, or before you hit play mode, it'll save it, and it'll save your changes. Okay, and it's guiding you through these. And now you know how to add a room. Okay, how do we create a new scene? And there's obviously error. See, now the library doesn't have. So that's a Unity thing that you can debug, that you can complain to Unity about. But anyways, so in this tutorial, you can either do those tutorials or start learning on your own, right? You can look at the character controller, because now we know that the player is a prefab. Okay, what is a prefab? What do I need to learn? So if you look in there, these are all the stats. You can right click on things. We can start looking at the script. But the key takeaway is that now your task is to gain experience. You start stacking up skills. Okay, and the best way to start, yes, first get familiarized with the platform, Unity, with the engine, and figure out how to develop for that engine. Where you're like, okay, how do we create new scenes? How are the scenes stored? And usually, for example, we have build profiles. In here, you have all the scenes, open scene list. And this is different in Unity 6. It changed. But you have here in the scene index. How do we get those in code if I want to do that? Most of those ChatGPT and the internet can help you. Like that information has been available for a long time, and even in Unity 6. You can go in here, folder structure. The last thing I'm going to go over is, so for today, we're going to go over some of these things, this specifically right here, like that. So in here, we have 10 things. I'm going to go over these 10 things, specifically with things that I've learned from publishing the game that you might not find. For example, we have the interface. As you notice, Unity a lot of times gives you errors when it fails. So in here, sometimes we got, if you can clear it, then the error is probably a UI error or some kind of malfunction that happened that doesn't impede the workflow, okay? If you clear the console and it's still red, that means the error is persistent. Sometimes you have build errors, and that's specifically because when you might have things that are compiled differently, and when you actually build, it'll give you the error. For example, Unity editor Unity editor scripts that are not in a folder. So for example, let's say I create a folder called editor. This is where I want to put scripts for these. These scripts that are up here are editor scripts, okay? So in Unity, oftentimes in here, if I have a script in here for the editor build, Unity knows not to compile it. But if you forget to do that, you will not, it will give you errors. So that's a gotcha that you might learn as you go. Unity scene management. Oftentimes you want to load scenes async and you think that they might load nicely, but it's not. Unity scene loading is one of the things that probably not so buggy, but it's not so friendly and as smooth as you think it might be. So oftentimes developers find their own ways to load scenes, like adding another scene in between, like an additive loading scene to make it a smooth transition, or you do a fade in, fade out, so that it's not as obstructive. Or usually you have a camera that's never unloads and you use that to transition. Okay, Unity game objects and components, that's pretty straightforward in here. A lot of times, one thing that you'll see a lot in Unity is these game objects. If you're like, oh, how do I make these nice UI sections? But it's just an empty transform that's named that. So you just click empty, and you just do this, and it separates it. Yeah, it's the little hacks like that that have nothing to do with it's just a visual. Okay. Prefabs and nesting. So with prefabs, you can have nested prefabs, which can get a little bit confusing. The main thing is that when you have a nested prefab, my advice, because once you have the prefab in here, if I tweak the numbers, you can see some of these numbers will be like highlighted. So if I put this to 0, see how it's wider than this 0? Is because that's changed in the Unity C in here. It's not in the main prefab. Now, if I hit here and I apply it all, it'll gray out. And now that is distributed to every root prefab. So this is an override. So let's say I override this to 5. Now, anytime the prefab, if I go in here, see how it's 0, and I change it to 800, and I go back, enemy turret, it's not going to change this, okay, because this is overwritten. So the override, it will trump whatever's changed by the default. So oftentimes I like to make sure that it can get confusing, because if you have things that are changed here, you might screw up when you want to update everything. Because the idea with the prefabs is that you can go into the default, and if I change this to 500 or 5000 and I save it, and then I go back, it will do it to every single turret. So I don't have to change. But that is one thing. With prefabs and nested prefab, you have to be aware of where you're changing. Usually I'm guilty of this too, but you always want to open the prefab and change it there. So that is, unless you are purposely overriding it because you need a variant in the scene, right? You need this to behave differently in this scene, and that is okay. Okay. Prefab transforms and object hierarchy. So this one with the hierarchies. One thing that you have to be aware of with transforms is and this only happens if you have a game that's like super long. Like for example, especially now with what is it called? Like generating worlds with procedural generation of stuff. If you're doing like expanding worlds or you're traversing through space, or let's say you're flying, the farther away you're from the center, but this is like way far. Like when you start going way out, you will start having problems with decimal points and accurate representation of things in transform. So if you're doing calculations that require precision, when you get really, really far, like super far out there, way out, it'll have problems. But it's very, very, very edge case. Okay, but that's something you only find out if you're doing some procedural simulations or you're loading scenes as you go, or um, yeah, and so you're traveling, so you're not doing much, you don't have much overhead, but the player is moving along a transform and you're continually going forever. Eventually, it's going to have some problems with the calculation. As for transforms and objects, um, the blue arrow is the forward direction. So if you do transform dot forward with the script, you can find the forward vector. This is the blue. Up is green, and so that is nice for like look at. So transform dot look at, or all those type of calls, so that you can use to move something along this forward direction or to look and rotate towards that. Then we have materials and shaders, so you can learn more about that. Materials, what you want to be aware of. One thing that I think I wish everyone knew or make sure they understood is the draw calls with materials. When you have a material, let me see if I can find one in here somewhere. All these are materials, but it's the texture, the look. And here, see how this has two materials? This is perfect. This material, let me take it out. It has two draw calls for no reason, because I have no idea. So this is dark gray and gray. So this is technically, even though it's one cube, it takes two draw calls because there's two materials there. Dumbest thing ever. I would never use this right now. I would delete it, and I don't know why this is here like this, because it's a nightmare. Like, I guess if you have it static, it doesn't matter. When you have something static, it will bake it, and it means it's not going to move. So it's not going to do any computations with it, at least like for the cube. This. So technically, this doesn't matter as much. But if you care about these draw calls, or you have some like a barrel that you're gonna shoot, or something you're gonna use that's not static, you can just have one material, one object. It'll save you. And even more so, if you have some people call an atlas, that means it's like it's put together from different textures. You can put different textures together into making one big texture map so that you have less draw calls. But you can also have one material that has a big amount or a lot of textures or a little different colors, or the textures are all laid out in this atlas yourself. So you can create the atlas and then have all the material, all the objects reference that one material. That's something that you can do. Those are options, things that you can do with materials that you can spend a lot of time learning about materials and shaders, and how to do cool stuff and how to do stuff that will wreck your performance. Post-processing is something that everyone likes to touch early on, but it can really take performance down, and so you have to be aware of that in budgeting with performance. But anyways, so materials, lighting, shadows, that's also another one. So with lighting and shadow, there's a lot to learn about that, and you could do a lot. So one thing that you can do is figure out what all these parameters mean. Study it, learn. There's a lot of YouTube videos, understanding like the light modes, shadow mask if you want. You can spend a lot of time on this and grab some assets from Unity that you already have or someone has. And there's a lot of free assets, and you can light, figure out how this is lit, right? And how to make things cube map, how to change it. The shadow is a big topic, because oftentimes you see the shadows and you're fine with it, but then in your game, when you want to actually tone them down, you realize that you can't if they're baked, or if they're not baked, it's expensive, and then how many lights you have, how many shadows. And so real time versus baked, there's a lot of things that you can learn. Then physics engines, collider. So this is the last thing that I want to talk about. There's big three components: colliders, layers, and tags. So this is a full, yeah. Okay, so if I were to, things that I've learned from collisions. So usually what I do, and this is just me because of what I've learned, I like to be purposeful with my physics layer. And in here, now I have here, you have a matrix. So what this matrix does is decides how physics works in here. Usually what happens is like, okay, well, what I usually, if this is the same as always, because it changed a little bit, what I like to do typically is do this. I start like this because then the only thing that interact with each other is its own layer. So these are its own layers. So for example, default only interacts with default. So these check marks decide whether layers interact with each other or not. Now, if I want water to interact with the UI, I click this on. If I want water to interact with the default layer, I turn this on. Okay. This is important for physics collisions. If you want everything to interact with everything, then that's fine. That's usually how it's all by default. The problem is you start getting into issues where things are detecting other things, and you're like, why is this doing this? And the reason is because you have every layer interacting with each other. And so how do you control that? And so I like to just either turn everything off or make sure that the colliders that are actually wanting to hit each other are programmed that way, that are intentional, because it can get really buggy at times when you're trying to figure out what hit what. Also, with trigger, if is trigger, oh, let me move this over. So is trigger is only going to work on kinematic objects. Okay, so if we have, the other thing is, if you are doing the detecting, you need to make sure that this thing, it has a rigid body. Rigid body is the ones that detects this. And if it's a trigger, you want to do is kinematic. So rigid bodies with kinematic objects are going to interact with trigger enters. Okay. Now, if you don't want a trigger enter detection and you want physics to interact like a force, when you're doing physics, force like a push or add an explosion that blows everything out and it gives force, you can do that with a rigid body and will push. Okay. So in order to do detections like on trigger enter or on collision enter, you need to make sure that the rigid body is the one doing the detecting. Okay. Now, if you have something that needs to add force, let's say this needs to like fly because something pushes it, then you want to make sure this has a rigid body because that's what you add force to. You grab the rigid body component in the script and you say add force, and it will add force in that direction. Use gravity. Oftentimes, if you click is kinematic, it will turn off gravity. So you don't have to like toggle both. You just toggle this on and off, and it'll work. These are different ways of the collision detection to see if it's continuous dynamic. So if you're having problems where it's not detecting it because it's not the detection is the object is moving too fast, then you want to change it to one of these continuous dynamic for the custom better performance. But that's something that you got to do. Interpolation if you want to interpolate. But that's the main thing with the rigid body kinematic. And the last tip that I'll give you with the rigid bodies is that if you want to move something, because I've seen this being asked before, you want to move something, you're moving it with the transform or the translate dot positions. You're just moving the position here. And you're like, it's not moving with the script. If this thing is a rigid body, you better move it with a force, right? Look, add force, physics. Now, if you want to move it with a transform dot position, then you change it to kinematic, and then you can move it like that. Okay, so each one has its use case. Rigid bodies, you add force, it's a physics object. You do a physics computation. It's expensive, but you can do all that stuff like blowing up and pushing forces out and in, using gravity collision so that they interact and it looks realistic. Take it off, you can do on trigger enter, and it's just this trigger, okay? And you can move the position regularly. With tags, sometimes you have things that you have tags here, and you might want to add a tag. The thing with tags is that you can't put multiple tags, and so oftentimes people say it's just a string. So if you're gonna check a string, why do you need this, right? So tags are useful depending on the edge case. Oftentimes, developers might prefer to use get component. Okay, like if you want this health thing, get component health pickup, and if it has that, do the thing or like access this. Okay, often get component is similar, but it might be better than just looking up strings, right? Because it might change, and strings you can have issues with not finding the right. It might have the string, but it might not have the script. Depends on what you're trying to do. But those are things that I found. My challenge to you guys, and we're gonna go over some more other here. I just went over some of these because these are come up a lot and are some things that I've learned. Go ahead and start learning. If you want to level up as a game developer, start with these basic things. Unity scene management. How do you do that? Talk to ChatGPT, go online, look at YouTube tutorials. But the difference of doing it this way than the usual way, what happens usually is, and this is, if you stay till the end, hopefully this will make sense to tie it all up, okay? I hope that you will become a better developer because this is what I wish I had years ago, okay? A lot, and I've seen this over and over, and I still see it. If you want to be different than everybody else, then you have to change what you do, okay? This is what everybody does when they first start. They have the game that inspired them to become a developer. They have ideas, and that's kind of like the motivation, right? Like, I want to make this. I want to do this in the world. Like I want to become a developer because you want to make a game, and you have an idea, and that's what like inspired you. And so you set out to do that. The problem is that now you're like, okay, how do I do this? And you just dive right in. And there's a lot of pitfalls with that. What I'm trying to say is, let's say you do want to do that. Okay, what are the skills that you need to know? Because the difference is that you can learn things, note them down, and not focus so much on a one project, but multiple projects that help you get to where you want to get. And the difference is that you'll have something to show for it. You will have a plan. Whereas if you're just trying to make a game that's in your head, you'll be going in circles for years. You'll be going through tutorials, because this is what you'll do. I've seen it. Say how to do this MMO, how to do this awesome game or whatever it is that you want to, this shooter. Okay, how to make a shooter. Okay, I got to get this template. Okay, oh crap, I don't know how to do this. And so you just go from, I don't know how to do this, and you try to do it, and then you do a really bad job at it, and then you keep doing it, and you're adding these things that you don't know how to do to your game that you want to make, and then 3 years later, you find out that it all sucks, and I'm like, oh, this is so frustrating, and you probably give up, or you keep going for 5 more years, or you're like, I'm so close, I'm 30%, I'm 60%, I'm 90%, I'm almost there, and this sunk cost fallacy keeps going, and then at the end, you tell yourself that it was worth it because you learned a lot. What I'm trying to tell you is, you can learn all the same things you could have learned in 10 years in less than a year. And you can have it wrapped in a little bow so that you can reuse it and make it even better, and then actually make your game, or make different variants of your game until you can actually make your game and have it be successful. That's the thing that I'm trying to change, is how you go about it. Because you're going to go through it, and then, but you're going to be in this wandering loop, and it's called tutorial hell for a reason. So instead of going through tutorial hell, go through this. Like, you have a list of things that you need to learn, okay? You list them down, just like I did this for this level. Let's say I want to do Marvel Rivals. This is all the things that I need to learn, even if it's not technically all of them. There's probably 100 more, but I have a starting point, okay? And this is a pretty systematic approach, and you can do this. So you can spend a week or a month learning all these things and become proficient in Unity, in all these things that I've seen people stumble, and learn it and say, okay, I understand what's going on. And it'll cost less headaches learning this way, because I've seen people get stuck, and it's like, even in multiplayer games, they're like, my stuff doesn't, I can't detect this. I've seen like people are like, oh my gosh, I need help. Someone, how do you do, what is going on? Or I'll pay someone to help me detect why my guys are not detecting each other, or I'm trying to hit the other person, but it's not hitting. And it's just a collision, an understanding of these layers, collision matrix, or physics engine, how the rigid body. People are trying to do multiplayer stuff without even understanding these things. And these things don't require networking. So understand the basics, figure out what you need, and still, like, these are things that you're gonna use for your game, and you need to learn. And it's better if you learn them in an environment where you can trash something, go back to it, practice, and then write it down. Write the things that you learn, figure it out, document it, so that you can continue learning. And these are great because it's gonna make your debugging a lot easier in the future, in the long run, and it's gonna help you get thinking and how you need to think. Because this is different in Unity than it is in Unreal. It's different in Godot, and you'll get used to how Godot or how the engine works. And that's good, because then, like I said, you'll level up. This is experience. You have to do these things. Character mechanics, combat and abilities. We're going to go over things. But first, do your homework and figure it out. Do it systematic. Write down things that you need to learn for your game, for your vision, and then start learning them. Get into Unity. Build. Make mistakes. Figure it out. And you will be able to take shortcuts. You will save years of problem solving. You will become a better developer today. Because if you, I promise you, if you do these things in 1 week, you will be ahead of people that are just like learning whatever it is they're learning at the time, because they're learning out of order. It's not going to make sense. This is building a foundation, and it's little by little adding a brick, and that you can reuse and continue to go. So please take the time to learn things the right way. Don't just go out there and, how do I build this? Figure out, what skills do I need to make the game I want to make? Write all those down. It's like, what is this most important thing right now? So when you go out there and seek for help from developers, my advice is, don't ask how to do something, but say, hey, I want to make this game. This is what I think I need to study. This is the order of priorities that I think I need to do. Do you guys think this is right? Or am I missing something? What would you add to that list? And people will be like, well, I think you should learn this before this, or do you know how to do this? And so that's why I asked ChatGPT. ChatGPT gave me an idea, and I'll start, and we'll figure it out together, and I'll show you. So today I talked about some of these things that I already learned here and there. I could always improve in lighting. I don't like lighting, but I've always, like, there's times where I just have to sit down and figure out why something's not being lit. and that's or what the lighting, the map, why is it doing certain things. So get out there and do it and level up. Next week, we will go over character mechanics with the first person shooter, and we'll figure these out as we go. Just like you, I'm learning and I'm showing you how I would take this if I was starting from scratch. So we'll see you next week.